Hi everyone. Many of us need publications in journals, and to achieve that, we have to get our manuscript past the editors of those journals. What exactly does the editors expect from authors? What all attention the author should pay in each stage of the publication process to ensure that what they are doing is actually in accordance with what the journals want from them? Let us discuss. This is the journal that I edit. Do you have any idea like how many manuscripts I received in the past about 6 months? It is actually more than 600. And how many of them may eventually make it into the journal? It will be less than 5% of all these submissions. And I'm sure that this is the situation in most of the good journals. So how you as an author can ensure that your article gets into this top 5%? Let us start with that. When an editor gets a manuscript, there are two options in front of him. He may either just reject that. That is, he will not send it to peer review. He will decide, or maybe his team of associate editors may decide that this one deserves no peer review and it is just rejected. Immediately return to the author. Or if he feels that he or she feels that the article has some merit to it, the editor may decide to send the article to peer review. So some of the most important factors that editors consider before desk rejecting or deciding to send the article for peer review are: the first one is whether the article is within the journal's stated scope. That is, whether this particular article belongs to the topic, the area that the journal usually covers. Will the message of the article be of interest to the journal's usual readers and all? So if your if your article is not within the journal's stated scope, like it will not be like moved to peer review, it will be desk rejected. We discussed this in the previous video also. Another important issue is, especially if that is a research report for case reports and letters, viewpoints, and all, that is fine. If it is a research study, like most good journals, almost all good journals will insist that the study should have an approval from an ethics committee. If it is not there, it is unlikely that the journal will consider your paper for peer review or eventual publication. Another important aspect is, especially if there is a clinical trial, there should be a registration in the National Trial Registry in India, that is CTRI. So like that, in every country they have their own registries. It is like people often feel that it is needed only for clinical studies, in the sense that when you are comparing one medicine with a placebo in an RCT and all, it is not so. Any intervention study, be it psychotherapy study, be it study in which you are giving some education to patients and bystanders and all, wherever some intervention is involved, you have to get a prior registration with your trial registry. Otherwise, like most good journals will not consider your paper at all. Another very important aspect editors will have a look at is whether the study is novel enough, whether its methodology is better than the existing literature on that area, whether your study is properly addressing the limitations that were present in the previous studies done on that topic, etc. If your study is not like a step ahead of the previous research, no good journal is going to consider your article. Now, finally, one another, though I am saying at the last, it is also very important, the language, like the kind of English that you have used, whether it is clear enough to the readers, to the peer reviewers, whether you have used a lot of complex words unnecessarily, like some of the, one of the previous videos, two of the our recent videos, we discussed that we will be having more videos in this channel on the language aspect of academic writing. So that also is very important. Like some journals, some editors may return the article to you suggesting to get it properly language edited by some native speakers or professional agencies, or other editors may outright reject the article, saying that the language is not good enough, the message is not communicated properly and all. So Based on these factors that the journals, the editors pay a lot of importance to, what all precautions the author should take. When you are at the journal website, you should give a lot of importance to, like as I told in the previous video also, what exactly is the aims and scope. If you feel that this particular journal is like not covering articles on my area, my topic, it is better not waste your time and editor's time by submitting to that journal. Submit that to like a more appropriate journal, a different. And also, before after you have decided to submit to one particular journal, you have to go through their instructions to others in detail. Many others do not do that. That is evident when as an editor I go through the submissions. What are their demands? Word count, number of tables, number of figures, the reference system, how to format the article, how to format the abstract, etc., etc. If you do that, like you will have a better first impression in the editor's mind. Otherwise, like again, the article will be returned to you and a lot of time may be lost in the process. And also many journals provide some checklists to make it easier for the authors to ensure that none of the important points are missed. At the same time, what happens in reality is that most of the authors, they just blindly keep checking the various items. If it is an online checklist, or otherwise if it is to be uploaded, they just upload the checklist saying that they have read it and they agree with all the items and all. You should not do that. You should go through each item carefully, and after that only you should tick that. That way also your chances at that particular journal increases. Now, briefly about the various kinds of files that you are supposed to upload when you are making the submission. Again, you have to make them as perfect as possible so that the editor feels that you are serious about the things. So most of the journals ask for a first page file, or some journals call also that title page also. In that you have to include a lot of information. Basically this page will be with the journal, with the editor, that will not be passed on to the peer reviewers. So all that information that has to be like available to the editor and journal, but not the peer reviewers, have to go to this particular page. So there you have to give the list of the authors who are the people who worked in the study. If it is a biomedical study, you have to follow the ICMJ criteria. For others, most of you will be familiar about that. For those of you who are not aware of this, I have given the clickable link in the description section of this particular video. So like only those people who meet the ICMJ's criteria for authorship, only they should be included in the authors list. We will have a separate video in the future about the ethical aspects of publishing. There we will discuss in detail about the various unethical practices related to authorship. So along with the list of authors, you have to also give the detailed affiliation of each of the authors. Journals differ here. Like some of the journals ask for the current affiliation of all the authors, while some other journals may ask for the affiliation when the study was originally conducted, while some other journals may ask you for both. So again, as I told you earlier, you have to go through the instruction section, and based on that, you have to include the appropriate affiliations. Then also like you have, it is better if you like include the ORCID ID, researcher ID, etc. We will discuss in some other video how, what exactly is this, how to get enrolled, but it is always better because that helps you like make connecting that particular article when it is published to you as the author, because there may be other authors also in your name, so you don't want to lose this particular article to other authors in various indexes, and also it is better to have these IDs. Then also you have to specify who is the corresponding author of that particular article. That has to be mentioned in the title page or the first page file. And many people make a mistake here, like when they are doing the study, when they are publishing the study and all, they may be staying in some hostel. So they usually give the hostel address, some temporary address, but that may be a problem in the future, because this is going to be a permanent record. 5 years later, 10 years later, if somebody wants to write to you, though most of the communication now is through email and all, it is better to have one permanent address there, so that in the future also people can reach you in that address. Along with the list of the authors, you have to also give details of what exact contribution each of the authors made to the manuscript. So there are usually two styles in which this is done. Some of the journals may ask you for an author contributor section, in which actually you have to write like SA planned the study and collected the data and did the analysis, while SKP helped in planning the data, then also did some of the data collection, then write some parts of the manuscript like that. What area which each of the authors contributed worked, that you have to mention. That is one way. Some other journals, they give you a table in which various domains are listed, and then you have to write the initials of each of the authors, and then you have to tick in which that is easier for you, like you have to tick in which of the areas each of the authors worked. But again, some authors I have seen making a mistake here, like you can see this particular form submitted to my journal, like this author who submitted it, he has ticked it for each of the authors, each of the domain there is a work. This raises the suspicion of the journal, no, like you are not a person who can be depended upon. This is highly impractical to happen in real life. So you should not make this kind of mistake. You should fill it in a genuine manner only. So along with that, like in that title page or the first page file, along with the details of the authors, you have to also give a kind of a declaration. Though this various components of this declaration, they may be also there in the checklist. It is better if you write this. So because again, if you have to submit this to another journal later after this journal rejects, again, like this already there with you, know. Only thing is, like when you are submitting to another journal, don't forget to change the name of the journal. I have seen many people submitting, no, like to me with the name of the journal to which they had earlier submitted still in that first page file. So don't make that mistake. So like have a declaration, and in that you mention all these items, whether you or any of the others have any particular conflict of interest related to that particular area, any financial issues, things like that. Then where you received the funding for the study from, then whether the entire material that you are submitting, you own the copyright for all the components, or if some of the components are from any other agencies, third parties, whether you have obtained their permission to use that particular material, like for example some figures, some tables, and also all this you have to mention in the first page file. Then also like about the ethics aspect, if you have received, you have to have the ethics approval, like which committee, what was the number, this kind of information you can mention there. If you adhere to the Helsinki Declaration, you took informed consent, all this kind of information you can put here. Then these two issues are also very important. Many people miss to mention that, like you have to declare that this article is not currently submitted to another journal, this is not currently under consideration by another journal, because it is highly unethical to submit the same manuscript at the same time to more than one journal. Also, if like you have presented this particular paper or maybe any part of it before in any conference or something, you should mention it here. People feel that that is not important. It is not so. Like most of the journals don't say you should not do that. Like even if it is presented earlier somewhere, they don't mind you submitting that article to the journal. But if you don't mention that, one problem that can arise is like before sending it to peer reviewers, the editor will run a plagiarism check. So like the editor may find out that this particular abstract is already there in some conference website. That will be picked by the plagiarism checker, and it may give a high value because of this kind of exact overlap for entire abstract section and all. So like then the editor may feel cheated and all. So don't do that. Better upfront you mention that this was presented in this particular conference. No harm in that. And also, like I told you about the conflict of interest, you have to mention that in the declaration. But some journals may ask you, especially those journals that are members of this ICMJ, or the, those members who other to the who explicitly state in their website that we follow the principles of ICMJ, International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. So those journals may demand you to submit this particular form for each of the authors. That is a declaration of potential conflicts of interest. Then you have to upload these files also separately. But many authors find a problem here, because mostly what they do is they try to access this file from their phone. It will not open, or even from their laptop or desktop they may not be able to open this. The problem is that like you need the latest version of your browser, the latest version of the PDF reader, and otherwise this may not open properly. So if you are not able to open this file properly, try updating your browser and your PDF reader and Now, some journals may ask for a covering letter specifically. Even if they don't ask for it, you can mention or you can include the covering letter in your first page file also. So there, if you are including a covering letter, again, you can mention. Basically, the purpose of the covering letter is to sort of bribe the editor, like to advertise your article to the editor, how important that article is, especially for that particular journal, for the readers of that particular journal, how this is going to be important and relevant. That kind of information you can include in the covering letter. That will help the editor reach a decision faster. Now also, especially if the journal says that they follow a double blind peer review, what that means is the peer reviewers will not know the identity of the authors or in which institution this particular study was conducted and all. So for that you have to ensure that now you are moving on to your manuscript file, probably the main file. So in that you have to mention, you have to ensure that your name does not appear in that particular file. But many people, like usually when we start typing an article, what we do is out of habit we write the heading, then we type the author's names and information, and all after that we type the article. This is the format in which usually we write, and this is the format in which we have seen articles published in journals also. But actually when we are submitting, this should not be there, because that way the blinding is lost. So that all information the journal will add later. This information the person who is designing the PDF of the article will take from the your first page file. That is why we need the first page file in the first place. So ensure that this kind of mistake you don't do. Don't mention your name or the affiliation etc. in the manuscript file. And also there are other aspects also that you have to pay attention to in the manuscript file. There are some places where people inadvertently break the blindness. One is like in the methodology section, they say that this particular study was done in this particular hospital or in this particular city and all. Though there may be some situations, some articles where you cannot avoid doing that, there you may get an exemption from the editor. Probably maybe you can mention that in the covering letter. Otherwise it is just to say that this was done in a tertiary care hospital, things like that. Or maybe you can at least leave it xxx, or you leave a dash there or something where the name actually is supposed to be. And also like where you mentioned the ethics approval, there also people usually mention ethics approval was obtained from this particular hospital, this was the number and all. That information should not be there. Just mention that ethics approval was obtained. The other details you can include, as I told you earlier, in that first page file. Acknowledgements, again, like these are the people who helped me, things like that. If you mention in the manuscript file, if such names are there, again reviewers may be able to identify in which hospital you are working and all. So acknowledgements you can include in the title page, the first page file, not in the manuscript file. Again, as I told you, if it is accepted, again the journal will do the necessary and incorporate all the information in the final PDF. Now, in the main document, especially in the manuscript file, in the what I have seen is many authors, those who are new to publishing and all, there are some mistakes they make. We will very briefly touch upon them. Like especially in psychiatry, psychology and all, we use lots of rating scales to assess patients. So but you need not write the paragraph and paragraph about those scales in the version that you are submitting to the journal. Though in your thesis or dissertation, maybe like there you can give a lot of details, but when you are submitting, you have to give the most essential information, especially what all adaptation modification you have done for your particular study, what is the validity, reliability. Only this kind of information is necessary. You don't have to give a lot of information about the scale. Then again, many authors make the mistake of repeating the same information both in the paragraphs, in the text form, and also in their tables. So that is better avoided. Again, many authors write this p is equal to 000, because what happens is they copy paste the p values from the SPSS, and this is the way the SPSS presents the zeros to them, especially if there are lots of decimal points. But actually if you double click on that particular cell, then you can get the actual p value. It is p value can never be 0. So what you can do is, when SPSS is giving you a p value like this, you write it as p less than 0.001. So that is how you should go about it, because if you write like this, it will give an impression to the editor and the reviewers that no, you don't know much about, you are new to research, things like that. And also the discussion section, many people write it very bad manner, because other sections are easier to write, but discussion you have to put a lot of mind to it, a lot of thought to it, and you have to do a lot of literature search. And also most of the articles discussion section is weak. We will have a video soon about how to write discussion section, but before submitting, ensure that the discussion section of your manuscript is in the best form it can have. And also, like many people, what they do is, when they initially when they were doing the protocol, they did the literature review and they prepared their references, everything, or when they were writing their thesis, again they did another round of literature review, but they don't try to update that before submitting. So like when the editor or reviewers have a look at the manuscript, the reference section, they see that the most recent reference is from 3 years ago, things like that. So that should not happen. Before submitting, you should look for more recent studies from your area, and also include them in the article and in the reference list, so that the people who assess your paper feel that like this is an updated version. And also the reference system, like there are loads of different versions of reference systems, the main ones being Vancouver and Harvard and all. But like it is better to like have the manuscript in complete format that particular journal is asking for. Even if that is not possible, at least if a journal is asking for Vancouver, you don't have a Harvard system. That is why I told in the previous presentation, you decide the journal beforehand, at least before you start writing the manuscript. Because why this is important? Okay, there is an option that before it is finally published, like you can change that. Like when during peer review and all, it is okay if the reference system is different also. But the problem is, like suppose the journal follows Vancouver system and your article is in the Harvard system. So one impression the editor and the reviewers can have is that this particular article was actually prepared for another journal that follows Harvard system. They somehow rejected that, and now it is coming to you. So they like beforehand itself they decide that there are some serious flaws in this manuscript. So what are they? Let me find them out and reject it. So this kind of thought process may happen. So to avoid that, it is better to follow at least to some extent the exact reference system that this particular journal is asking for. There is also one very useful method you can use to the convey to the editor and the reviewers that the reporting in your particular manuscript is complete. You have included all kind of relevant information in your write-up. For that, actually, you can use some checklists from this particular website, Equator Network. They have a specific checklist for each kind of manuscripts, systematic review, cross-sectional study, case report, RCT, things like that. So some journals specifically ask you to submit the relevant checklist as a supplementary file for not for publication, just for the reviewers to see. And even if the journal has not done that, there is no harm in you submitting, because that conveys a good impression to the editor that you are an experienced researcher, you know about the value of this checklist, you know about the importance of a complete reporting, etc. And also why I am highlighting some minor points like these, that because that is very important. If you consider one thing, like when somebody is assessing your research report, they are taking a lot of things at face value. They are believing you on various counts, like you have already actually collected the information, you have painstakingly entered all that information into your master sheet or your analysis software, you have done the analysis, then you had then like taken all the information from that and put them into the tables and all. So nobody like suspects you of any foul play, like you are believed for whatever you have submitted. But like when there are lots of inconsistencies, when there are lots of mistakes in the various components I mentioned earlier, like if it gets conveyed to the editor or his team that you are not sufficiently experienced, so then that first impression, no, that may be lost. So like when there is a lot of doubt about a lot of other things, like that kind of other contribution form that I showed you earlier, no, then like somebody who submitted such a form, no, how can the editor believe that you actually did the study? Like you can very well suspect that your entire data, your entire paper is fudged. So that is what in psychology they call the halo effect. Now you create a first impression about a person based on the some of the first like characteristics that you encounter. So based on that you make an impression about the entire personality and their makeup of that person. So that is why all these even minor factors are important when you are submitting, because the overall impression that all your files, the kind of way in which you have dealt with the submission process, the entire thing convey a good or a bad impression to the editor, and that will have a bearing on what kind of decision he or she make about your manuscript. And also, suppose they decide to send it to peer review. In some journals, there is an option that you can suggest some peer reviewers who can assess your data. Again, some authors try to cheat on this aspect. That is why these days many journals don't ask for reviewer suggestion. Even if you have suggested, they don't follow your suggestions, because what people do is they suggest the names of some of their friends or previous colleagues and all, so that if they assess, no, you will get more positive feedback and a favorable decision. But you should not do that. Even if you are asked to suggest, or you are suggesting on your own, you suggest some people who have already done some quality work on your area, those people who are already cited in the reference section of your article and all. Because if you give your friends and colleagues and all, somehow if in this era of social media and internet and all, it is not very difficult for the editors to find out that these people are already related to you. So better don't try such tricks.